When I was growing up, I was told by many of the adults around me that when they were younger, the two scariest movies of all time were The Exorcist and The Omen. I've seen The Exorcist many times over the years, and aside from how brilliantly put together the whole thing is by William Friedkin, it's most definitely held up in fear factor alone for me. That film is deeply unsettling in so many ways, and I had never seen The Omen until the other night though. I was really excited to check it off my list because it's a somewhat iconic film I had never seen before, and as a fan of Richard Donner, I was excited to see how the man behind Superman, The Goonies, and Lethal Weapon would tackle something so supposedly unholily scary. I walked away from The Omen ever so slightly disappointed though, likely due to my own expectations, but I just found that so little of the horror elements to this held up for me. Before we talk about all of that though, I'd like to take a bit to talk about what I admired about this film, because despite it not being consistently scary to me, there's a lot it's gotten me to think about. For one, the famous birthday party scene at the beginning. It's got one of the most chilling performances out of a character who's in it for 2 seconds, and that line of dialogue that she says before doing you-know-what is so spine-tingling that even if the film did literally nothing else, it would still be worth viewing. Aside from that scene, I found Richard Donner's handling of the quiet moments here to be far more positively memorable than the moments that are designed to be maximalist and scary. There's a moment early on when Mrs. Baylock is smiling at Gregory Peck before turning around and immediately shifting her facial expression to one of cunning and evil, and it's one of the most impressive performative switch-ups I've seen in a while. Also, just my favorite moment in the film, period, is one where Gregory Peck follows Baylock into Damien's room, and she stands watching them in the corner of the frame for several seconds until the camera moves half an inch and obscures our view of her. We know she's still there, but the thought of it is far more unsettling. It's such an ingenious manipulation of background blocking tropes we've come to expect from modern horror films, and despite this being a 50-year-old movie, I haven't seen much of anything like that specific choice in a modern film. It's spectacular stuff. Furthermore, what I find myself contemplating a lot about The Omen is something that films like The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby before it do as well, and much more successfully, I might add, and that's the perspective and analysis these films give towards the role of a mother and the suppressive nature of a mother's life in early childhood. So many of the bad things that happen in this movie could have been easily avoided if Gregory Peck had just swallowed his damn pride and listened to his wife. And if that sounds like an on-the-nose analysis of the film, that's because it is. And that is what leads me into the biggest problem I have with the film, and that is that it has its priorities all out of whack. There's room for a tremendous film about postpartum depression, the suppression and neglect of our mothers, and the regressivity of modern parental roles here, but the film feels too torn between that and serving up kills to make the audience squeal and hide behind their faces that only wind up looking dated 10 years after the release. The reason The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby before it worked as well as they did was they knew the scares came naturally from their thematics and were a product of them, not the other way around. There's still a couple of gnarly moments hidden here and there in The Omen that I really like, but they feel largely separated from what the film is overcomplicatedly trying to say. That opening scare and line of dialogue plays actually perfectly into those maternal themes, and it's the scariest bit of the movie. That is not a coincidence. I also think that while Jerry Goldsmith's score is beautifully composed and has some really memorable tracks, it's kind of a case of having too much of a good thing. It is exceedingly plastered over nearly every moment of screen time, and the film could very much benefit from having a few scenes without it to bask in the severity of certain moments. The film is just under 2 hours, which for a film of its type is a bit longer than usual, and for the first 40 minutes or so, the pace feels pretty tight, but then it divulges into extremely repetitive territories and utterly abandons the character of Damien almost entirely until the final 5 minutes. It becomes a detective story of sorts that no one can seem to find the answers for, no matter how easily they are presented to our characters. There's an argument to be made that that methodology elevates the horror by having elements remain unknown, and while I do find that to be true in certain cases, here it just kind of frustrated me more, especially considering the kid who plays Damien actually does a great job in the film, and the film sometimes feels like it's hiding behind a poor child performance when said child performance is actually wonderful. I would have loved to spend more time with him instead of these bozos. And my point is proven even harder when the moment the kid finally shows up again in the final 10 minutes of the film, it gets really good again. The moral dilemma surrounding the climax is really interesting, the kid's performance is spectacular, and the final scene in Fourth Wall Break is almost as unsettling as the opening scare. So at the end of the day, it just color me more conflicted than anything else. There are some real highs to this film, and then there's the scenes where the priest gets impaled and the mom falls off a second floor railing as if it's a skyscraper. I still love everyone involved with this, even if the film had the audacity to date itself a bit after 50 years of being a well-renowned work in the genre. Thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in to the October Horror Binge. Tomorrow we're going to bring in another more lighthearted edition, since we've been pretty nihilistic and existential over the past few days, so it's about time for a palate cleanser. As always, like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.